This is Tom, and here's another KQ Morning Show rewind from Walser Automotive Group, walser.com. William McKeen, author of Everybody Had an Ocean, Music and Mayhem in the 1960s at Los Angeles. Man, William, you got some stories to tell.
Yeah. I carved out a whole decade of Los Angeles music history, and it happens to have, all this great music, but running through it is kind of an undercurrent of mayhem in the form of kidnapping and murder, and eventually one of the Beach Boys coming home one day from a recording session and finding Charles Manson and about 20 naked women in his house. And so that relationship, ended up, Manson was so determined to be a rock and roll star, and even with the help of a Beach Boy and a famous record producer, he couldn't get a contract, and so he killed people because he was mad. And I always wonder, well, if we'd had American Idol back then, what would have happened if Manson had that outlet? And I thought, well, it could have been worse, if he would have made the Final Five and then been cut. But it's jam packed with stories of all kinds of people.
It's interesting because my take, what I had always heard, is that Frank Sinatra Jr. was involved in his own kidnapping, and I had always heard that Bobby Fuller killed himself.
Well, that was the official word, that Bobby Fuller killed himself, but that would require him to, bludgeon himself and soak himself in gasoline and then drive to his apartment and die within about 4 minutes because somebody had looked out and the car wasn't there, and then 4 minutes later it was there. And that's kind of a canard about Frank Sinatra Jr. I feel sorry for the guy because that was a claim made by the defense attorney that Frank Sinatra Jr. had faked his own kidnapping, and it stuck. He was actually kidnapped by three people who I would call them clowns, but it would be an insult to clowns. And interestingly enough, the kidnapping was subsidized by Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean, the surf duo.
Sure.
One of Dean's high school buddies said to him, "Hey, Dean, can I borrow some money?" And Dean said, "What for?" He says, "I'm going to kidnap Frank Sinatra Jr." And he said, "Oh yeah, sure." And he figured the guy was Looney Tunes until he did it.
He did it. I'll never forget it, as a matter of fact.
Right,
and
right.
It was all about money.
That's one of the funniest stories in the book. Even though I'm sure it wasn't so funny for Frank Sinatra Jr. at the time.
William, I got to ask you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, at the end of his life, Frank Sinatra Jr. ended up in the same social circle with the guy that had kidnapped him because he'd gotten out of prison and he made a lot of money in the stock market. So he was in sort of the upper echelon of L.A. society, and they'd see each other at parties. I could imagine what that was like. Didn't get to ask Frank Jr. about it, though, because he died.
Why would you want to kidnap the son of a guy associated with the mob? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, these guys weren't too bright, but oddly enough, the main kidnapper, Barry Keenan, had gone to high school with Dean Torrance, and at the same high school was Nancy Sinatra and a whole bunch of other people.
Oh, okay.
Sinatra Sr. had sent Sinatra Jr. off to boarding school, and so Barry, the kidnapper, thought, Jr. needs some love. And so if I kidnap him, his father will realize what a great person he is. So one of his motives for doing the kidnapping was to bring the family closer together. Oh, and it is, also when he called up with his ransom demand, Frank Sr. said, "I'll give you $1 million to get my son back." And the kidnapper said, "That won't be necessary. We only need $250,000."
Jeez. Well, this is Tom Bernard. You just heard another KQ Morning Show rewind from my guys at Walser Automotive Group, walser.com. Hear today's entire KQ Morning Show on demand at 92KQRS.com, the KQ mobile app, or on iTunes.